Hi, my name is Taras Struk, and I am a student at Nashville Aikikai.
Hi, my name is Andres Bermudez. I'm one of the instructors and senior students at Nashville Aikikai.
This is the Nashville Aikikai Podcast. Today on the Nashville Aikikai Podcast, we get to know Andres Bermudez. We get a better understanding of why he practices Aikido, and we have a reading from The Art of Peace. So today I'm with Andres. Andres is, like I said, a senior student and one of the student instructors at Nashville Aikikai, and the first one we're interviewing today at Nashville Aikikai Podcast. So Andres, why did you start practicing Aikido?
Well, when I first moved from Maine back to Boston, I wasn't doing anything in particular as far as exercise, and my good friend Butch asked me one day, "Hey, have you ever heard of Aikido?" And I said, "I've heard of it," and he said, "Well, I practice it. You should come practice with me." And Butch being one of my best friends, I took him up on it, and that's how I was introduced to it. Just very casually through a good friend.
So why did you come back? I mean, you started because a friend brought you to the dojo, introduced you. So what kept you coming back to the dojo?
I realized that philosophically, Aikido and myself were a very good match. The idea of not resisting your opponent and yet still being able to control him was very appealing based on my education, which was mostly in philosophy and religion, and those things they went well together. Not trying to force somebody to your point of view, but still being able to convince them of a more proper course of action. So, and Aikido, I believe, does that. You're not trying to force somebody in a particular direction, but you are encouraging them to modify their behavior towards you.
So what really kept you coming back was more the philosophical points as well. I mean, the physical points were great. I mean, you work out, you stay in shape, but exactly. The philosophy was really a driving force in your life because you are a theologist in some respect.
Yeah, the philosophical points were huge. They wouldn't have been there, I think, in other martial arts, which are more hard-hitting. The other thing, which I think is very important in any martial art or any activity a person engages in, is the other people in the dojo. They were great fun to practice with and hang out with afterwards. And if you're having fun doing something and you like the people you're doing it with, that goes a long way in your continuing participation in that activity.
Yeah. So how many years have you been at this now?
I have been doing Aikido since 1993.
93. Okay, so I'm not very good at math, but that'd be about what? Let's see, 90. So 2009 would make that 10 years. 1999, 20 years. So let's say 27 years.
Yes, and there was about a 4 or 5 year hiatus in there when I first moved to Nashville and I was getting to know my wife.
Yeah.
But from beginning to end, about 25 years, I'd say.
Somewhere in there. Wow, that's a pretty long time. Do you recall any specific activities or any specific events that happened on the mat that kind of stuck with you or kind of burned into your mind? Maybe something you picked up from maybe our dojo chose Tom and Mary Sensei or a Shihan that came?
There's no one particular event that has stuck with me throughout the years. It's more of a amalgamation of different lessons learned through time, and you try to, work those in your mind as you go along, and try to find some coherent whole in amongst all of them. So the idea of never resisting your opponent, because there's always going to be somebody stronger than you, has been drilled into me I don't know how many times. And I still have to relearn that lesson every time I'm faced with somebody either new or somebody more aggressive than people I'm accustomed to. And that is that. And because I'm not a very big person, that lesson is a hard-won lesson every single time.
Yeah. I kind of have the opposite problem. I'm a pretty big guy, and so it's not that I'm fighting people, it's just that I don't realize how much strength I'm putting into things. So I have kind of the opposite, like softening up and just kind of experiencing and feeling what people are putting in is kind of difficult for me. So you just had a pretty big event happen in your Aikido life. You just tested for your Sandan.
I did.
So, what kind of preparations, how did you get in that mindset? Or was there anything that you did special, or did you?
I reviewed every video of my previous tests that had been taken, so Shodan and Nidan. Mm-hmm. And I saw what I did and how I did it. And then it wasn't so much a physical preparation as it was a mental preparation. Physically, I was prepared for the test. I'd been prepared for the test for a couple of years. And so I wasn't concerned about doing the techniques or how I would perform the techniques. It was more a preparation of how I would present myself on the mat and how I would react to particular opponents. So I imagined myself with specific individuals and how I would perform a technique on that specific individual, because every individual is different. So, for example, at our dojo here in Nashville, I practice a lot with Mark Miller. Practicing with Mark Miller is different than practicing with another student at Natural Aikikai, Cassandra. And she's different than practicing with her husband, Jason.
Yeah.
And so I imagined a certain technique, and then I imagined myself doing it with those 3 or 4 or 5 different people.
Yeah.
And then I'd move on to a different attack and a different technique, and I'd run the scenario again through my mind.
Because it's kind of hard to imagine who's going to come up during the test at what point, and what technique is going to be called when that person is up. So you kind of have to be prepared for all variations or all variants.
For all people and all techniques.
Yeah.
Which is one of the primary considerations in Aikido.
Yeah.
Is you're never trying to practice with the same person all the time, because they're not going to be the person who actually ever attacks you, really looking to cause you physical damage. It's going to be a complete stranger who you have no control over and no idea what size or shape they're going to be. So it's better to prepare for all sizes and shapes.
Yeah. Cassandra, God love her, she's
tiny.
She's tiny, yeah. I don't know how tall she is, but she's not very tall. And then, you go from Cassandra to Scott, and Scott's
6'3".
Yes, he's 6'3". So he's almost, a whole foot, maybe a foot and a half taller than Cassandra. I'm a foot and a half, maybe a little too much, but
yeah, but he's got a much longer reach. He's got much more weight behind him.
Yeah.
And yet, I'm more concerned about Cassandra than
I am Scott. Yeah, because I kind of understand that place. Although I haven't been practicing as long as you have. But so, what was your life like before Aikido? I know you've reached this point in Aikido, which not very many people do reach. Sandan is the highest rank that we currently test for, and what was your life like before you started?
Before I started Aikido, I'd always done sports, but I've never been a big sports fan. So after I got out of high school, I never really pursued anything physical like sports again. And I didn't realize something was missing physically, and so I'd gotten out of shape. And I'd gotten a little complacent with my physical being. When Aikido came into my life, it was a challenge, to say the least, because you're learning to move your body in a brand new way that most people never consider. The same is true of any physical endeavor. So if you're playing basketball for the first time or dance for the first time, you're learning to move your body in a brand new way. And so it took a while for me to adjust past the clumsiness of learning the basic movements and then become comfortable with them, over the years. But the interesting thing is it teaches your body to move in a new way, and it teaches you to think in a new way, because this is a martial art and you're thinking, you're being faced with an opponent. How do you present yourself to an opponent? So one day I left the dojo and I was walking down the street to my car, and I thought, oh, this applies here and now. I'm walking down the street. How am I presenting myself to a potential person who might be watching me to mug me or do something bad to me? And I changed the way I walked to be more conscious of that and more aware of my surroundings. So I went from being less aware physically of myself and my surroundings to being more aware physically of myself and my surroundings.
My wife and I, when we're practicing and we see new people come on the mat, we kind of recall our time on the mat at the very beginning, where we had that like baby deer kind of doughy body posture, and we kind of would collapse at the wrong moment, or we didn't quite know where to put our feet. And then 4 years later, I still have moments like that, but for the most part, I have a little bit more zanshin, just that sort of martial mindset, martial awareness.
Yeah, and it's very important to realize that whenever a new person walks on the mat, that you once were that person.
Yeah.
And also realize that the way they move their first time on the mat is the way most other people will react if ever you are attacked by somebody else.
Yeah, just kind of not knowing, kind of feeling out of place.
Yeah.
We go from not knowing how to move to getting a better sense to where you are, where I wouldn't say you have all the answers in every situation, but you have a pretty good sense of your own body. Have you met a person of a rank at your level or higher level that you admire or kind of look up to? Or
I've practiced with a lot of people in 25 years. I started off with Mitsunari Kenai Sensei up in Boston, who was a uchideshi of O Sensei. He lived with him in Japan, and then he was sent to Boston to start a dojo. And
just a quick moment. What's an uchideshi?
An uchideshi is a live-in student. So Kenai Sensei lived at the dojo with O Sensei, just as in a master and apprentice sort of relationship in the United States. The apprentice lives with the master and learns from the master directly. So did Kenai Sensei live in O Sensei's house along with a bunch of other students, and they all practiced regularly 6 hours a day in addition to their other duties.
What about the sensei did you admire?
Kenai Sensei, he was gentle, but not somebody you would want to intimidate or take for granted, thinking, oh, I can take this guy. He was very much, in American terms, he was very much like President Teddy Roosevelt. He spoke softly, but his Aikido was his big stick. And so I never imagined that anybody in our dojo would stand a chance in successfully landing an attack on him if he didn't want it. He wasn't trying to intimidate you. He wasn't trying to impress you either. He was just who he was. And that was, I think, a very compelling thing for me, because in the martial arts, there are a lot of people who teach who are trying to impress you and or intimidate you. And I know of lots of teachers who fall in that bill, and I've learned a lot from them as well, but they never drew me towards them the way Kenai Sensei did. He was a singular personality, I think, in Aikido, and I believe in martial arts.
You're at this level now. You have your personal heroes, and When I watch you on the mat, you look really confident. You look like you kind of have it down. So what struggles are you having? I mean, 'cause I can't see them, obviously. So what kind of things would be a challenge for you when it comes to Aikido?
Oh, you see my struggles all the time whenever we practice together.
How is
Because
that?
you're one of the few people who feels comfortable, not so much resisting, but thinking, I'm going to make this a little bit more difficult for him. Why not? He can handle it. And it's great because the biggest challenge I think any person handles in any martial art is what I call the lizard brain, is the reactive instinct that drives us without us even being aware of it. And so whenever I meet resistance on the mat from an opponent, I think, okay, I need to relax and move more softly. But very often the lizard brain takes over first and says, I met resistance, I'm going to meet that resistance with some strength of my own. And that inevitably leads to my failure. And so my biggest challenge still after 25 years is overcoming the biology that I've been saddled with in this body, and trying to overcome those instinctual reactions and learn to move more purposefully and with a conscious design, knowing that I'm not going to overcome you or, for example, Phil, who's also a fairly big guy, if you choose not to cooperate.
I don't know if it's a cooperation thing when I practice with you. I see you and I think, just like you said, I think, well, this guy can handle it. You definitely can handle it. And so I'm not trying to resist, but I'm just trying to, not comply all the time.
And that's fine. That's what somebody who's been practicing for a long time needs, because anybody can comply constantly, and then you don't learn too much unless your boundaries are pushed. And as long as both people are smiling, there's never a problem.
It's not really an issue, I guess.
No, because I know you're not doing it to be malicious, and I know Phil's never malicious about it. They just kind of look at you and say, what are you going to do now?
Yeah, because I am trying to look for openings. I am trying to find those moments where I can take advantage of the situation, not because I want to hurt you or because I want to take you down or anything like that, but because I'm trying to feel what my partner is putting in, so that I know how to appropriately react. That's one of the hardest things that I have to deal with, is especially when I work with Marta. Sometimes she's so soft and gentle, and sometimes she's just hard. And in those moments where she's soft and gentle, right, I can't figure out what to do. I just can't. I try to. I can't muscle through it because there's not enough resistance to muscle through it. I can't be as soft and gentle as she is because I'm all big and bulky. So it's kind of hard for me to soften up. So I'm working on feeling what the person's putting in so that I can appropriately adjust to the situation. I think that's you can learn the shape of the technique, but identifying how your own Aikido looks, how that works for you, what the art is for you, is, I think, fundamentally different for every individual.
It is completely. But to get back to what you're saying, what you're doing is exactly what you should be doing, as far as trying to find out where the openings are in your opponent's technique, because we practice Aikido in a very regimented way where one person is the attacker, one person is the defender, and those roles very rarely change until both people agree on it. But in reality, if a fight starts, there's not going to be any clearly defined roles. Both people will be attackers, both people will be defenders, and you have to be able to flow from one to the other by seeing and reacting to what your opponent is doing. Yeah,
I think the best example that I've ever seen of that was Trace Hoffmeister Sensei in the last seminar that we had in November. He would come in for an attack, and it was with you. He would you would kind of give him some resistance, and he would just kind of take whatever you were giving and kind of turn it around, and he'd flow, and it was he'd fall back, and at the same time as he's falling, he'd throw you. I have never seen anything like it in my life, and then when I saw that this last time, I'm like, I have got so much work to do, because when I get attacked, I just clench and get stiff, and he he just kind of goes with it. It's always really impressive seeing someone that skilled, that practiced when they're demonstrating their art.
And he's excellent at that particular thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been times when I attacked him during a seminar.
Mm-hmm.
He went to do a technique. He didn't get it just right, so I flowed out of it. I started doing a technique to him. He flowed out of it.
Yeah.
And then we went back and forth for what seemed like a long time before he finally put my face down on the mat.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, I like what Mary Sensei said this one time. You know, sometimes you get up and you think, I'm going to do this technique, and that's what I'm going to do. But it's just not there. And you kind of try to force it. You can't force it. You have to do what's there. You have to feel flowing. Like, you have to feel that movement. And, like, once I have my mind set on that technique, I can't figure out how not to do it. And it never looks good because I always try to, especially with Phil, I always try to force that. And when Phil comes in, you know, a guy like him and a guy like me, it's like two giant boulders clattering together and then falling apart. It's like the epitome of, you know, an immovable force and an unstoppable object. You know, that's how it feels. But, you know, so doing any technique on Phil is just difficult for me. I always have the hardest time working with him.
And Phil's a great person to practice with. He teaches me every time we practice that there is no uke and there is no nage.
Yeah.
You will encompass both those roles multiple times in the space of 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And so you have to be able to flow from one to the other and always be aware, like you were saying earlier, about what the other person is doing so that you can then move appropriately.
Yeah. That awareness, I think, is the thing that takes the longest to build, because it's just practice, and you can't build it unless you're on the mat working with people just on a regular basis. You know, and you would think that, you know, going 2-3 times a week is enough. I think it takes more than that to really get a good sense of how to move, how the other person's moving. And then here's the thing: once you get comfortable with this one individual, it's time to switch. Sensei claps, and you go on to the next technique, and you think, but I'm still working on that one, you know.
And you're still working on that one, and you're still working with that particular person.
Yeah.
And you can switch the person and do the same exact technique,
and it's not.
And it's going to be different.
Yeah.
But that's why you always keep coming back.
Yeah,
that's all it is.
Exactly
just keep
right.
coming back.
Yeah, you just get up. You take the fall, you get up, and you're like, what did I do this time? You just continue. You have to continue.
You persevere.
Yeah. What would you say to a person if they ask, you know, why Nashville Aikikai?
Nashville Aikikai is a great place to train because it's a serious place to learn a martial art, but it's not an intimidating place. And lots of martial arts dojos can be pretty intimidating for somebody who's never practiced a martial art before. You walk in and you see all these very often big guys throwing punches and kicks, and you think, I don't know if this is for me. And we are serious, and we throw punches and kicks and throw people across the mat as well, but it's a more welcoming atmosphere. It's something you can practice for your entire life. I've seen people in their 80s on the mat. They don't practice as hard as they used to when they were 20, and neither will I when I'm 80, but I will still be on the mat.
Well, again, thank you for joining us, and I look forward to practicing with you again. This is a reading from The Art of Peace.
All things, material and spiritual, originate from one source and are related as if they were one family. The past, present, and future are all contained in the life force. The universe emerged and developed from one source, and we evolved through the optimal process of unification and harmonization.
Typically in our dojo, we'd be getting ready for a plethora of seminars that happen during the spring. But as We are currently all experiencing quarantine and shutdowns because of the coronavirus, and we're trying to do our parts to help. We have decided to cancel classes. We've decided to cancel any seminars that happen at Nashville Aikikai. I know that the sentiment is probably held by everyone in our dojo, but we'd like to thank those members of our dojo and members of our society who are currently risking their own lives to help those around them. If you are staying at home, you are helping. If you are limiting your public access, you are helping. And thank you for that. Please continue to practice social distancing, continue to wash your hands according to the CDC guidelines. Keep in mind that the things we do now can alleviate some of the pressures that are on our medical community. The things that we do now can curb the impact of this disease. This is far from over, and we have a long way to go, but we can get there together.
This podcast is brought to you by Nashville Aikikai. Nashville Aikikai is located on 1701B Fatherland Street in Nashville, Tennessee. Nashville Aikikai is a not-for-profit organization whose mission is to enhance the lives of Nashville Aikikai students and enable them to share the principles of Aikido through their contact with others in the community.
Nashville Aikikai is exclusively supported by the dues paid by our members and the donations that we receive from visitors and members of our community. To donate and for more information, please visit us at nashvilleaikikai.org and click the donate button. Again, that website is nashvilleaikikai.org.